Hello, everyone. I'm GeekWire co-founder John Cook, and on behalf of the entire GeekWire team, welcome to today's virtual roundtable. We've got a great session in store, and we're going to be talking about all of the innovation coming out of the great city of Calgary, our friendly neighbors to the north. At GeekWire, we've had the pleasure of partnering with the Calgary Economic Development Organization at past GeekWire events. And today we're excited to dive deeper into Calgary's tech ecosystem. A big thanks to Calgary, which helps foster economic success and community, for supporting this discussion. While I've not yet traveled to Calgary, I'm sorry to say, Mayor Nenshi, I've not made it to your great city yet. I have spent time in Alberta. In fact, about 20 years ago, I met my future wife in Banff. So Alberta has great memories for me, and I'm very much looking forward to the opportunity when we get through the pandemic of visiting all of you in Calgary. So before we hop into the discussion today, just a couple quick housekeeping items. We were bombarded with audience questions for this session. We had dozens and dozens come in, and I'm going to try to get to as many of those as I can through the course of the conversation. So just bear with us on those. And if you do have a question that pops up during the session, you can use the Zoom Q&A chat to post that, and I'll be looking at that during the course of the discussion. Also, today's virtual roundtable is one of many we have going on at GeekWire. In fact, next week on December 17th, we're hosting another virtual roundtable titled Stories of Resilience in an Unprecedented Year. We're going to hear from a group of entrepreneurs who've transformed their businesses during this very stressful period. And to sign up for that, just go to geekwire.com/events. We hope to see you all there. Now, let's meet our panel. We're pleased to welcome the mayor of Calgary, Naheed Nenshi. Mayor Nenshi was elected as the 36th mayor of Calgary in 2010, winning re-election in 2013 and 2017. And before entering public service, Mayor Nenshi worked with McKinsey, where he designed policy for the government of Alberta. Welcome, Mayor Nenshi.
Thank you.
Next, we're pleased to welcome a key voice in Calgary's startup community, Bobbie Racette. Bobbie is founder and CEO of Virtual Gurus, a 17-person startup which matches virtual assistants and freelancers to companies. Bobbie was recently named Canada's Indigenous Entrepreneur of the Year and Woman Entrepreneur of the Year by Startup Canada. Thanks for joining us, Bobbie. And rounding out our panel is James Lochrie. James is the founder of Thin Air Labs, an angel investment and design firm in Calgary. He previously co-founded fintech startup Wave, which was sold to H&R Block for more than $500 million last year. And welcome, James. So we've got a great discussion in store, and I'm really excited to dive in. I've been doing a little bit of my due diligence on Calgary since, as I said, I've never been there. And the first part of my research came across the weather. And of course, here in Seattle, where GeekWire is based, we're obsessed with the weather. We're rain-soaked. We're always locked in gray. And I was amazed to find out about the near constant sunshine in Calgary. So other than the 332 days of sunshine per year, which certainly appeals to us here in Seattle, what really differentiates Calgary's innovation ecosystem? And Mayor Nenshi, why don't we start with you, since you're the city's chief cheerleader?
Sure. Thanks so much for taking the time. Thanks, everyone, so much for joining us today. And I'm not sure where everyone is from, but we can certainly talk a lot about the competitive advantages of being in Canada generally, but specifically about the Calgary market while we're here. So I'll tell you one thing that you will probably be a bit shocked at, John, which is the last time that I was in a terrible winter storm and my flight was canceled, almost causing me to miss a concert I wanted to go to in Vancouver, was in Seattle. And we're used to that over here. So yes, it is very, very sunny. It can sometimes be cold. But the funny thing about Calgary weather is twofold. Number one is we never stop talking about it. And number two is the seasons don't come in any semblance of order here. Any particular day can be a beautiful summer day in December or a freezing cold day in August. But that's what keeps us on our toes here all the time. More important, let's talk about the innovation ecosystem. So Calgary has long been the economic engine of Canada, largely but not entirely based on our role as a supplier of plentiful, green, and reliable energy to the world. And of course, the world has changed. And of course, what that means when I say plentiful and reliable energy means something different now than it did 10 years ago. But because of the fact that we have had that important role for Canada in the world, it is a place that has always embraced innovation. It's a real new world city where I often say nobody cares where you come from or what you look like or who your daddy was or where you went to school or how you worship or whom you love. What we care about is that you're here and that you have ideas and that we want to hear them and we want you to do well here. So there's some really interesting opportunity now in Calgary, really around how do we grow the new economy here. Our economic development strategy is simply called Calgary in the New Economy. And it's focused in an interesting way because our vision is this. We want to be the Canada city of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs. Now, I could just stop there and I would have described every city's vision. The next part is the part that's important. We want to be Canada's city of choice for the world's best entrepreneurs interested in solving the world's biggest problems in energy, in life sciences, in feeding 7 billion people through agri-food and agri-technology, in making access to finance equitable through financial services, in allowing us to tell our stories through the creative industries. And so if you are an entrepreneur who wants to solve big problems, then this is the environment, this is the ecosystem, this is the community that you really want to be in. And finally, in case I forget to say it later, what we trade on here is our quality of life. Last year, the Economist Intelligence Unit once again called Calgary the best city to live in the entire Western Hemisphere. And as soon as we're done here, I have to do a little video for a company that is moving 600 employees from suburban Toronto, Mississauga, Ontario, to Calgary. And, it's going to be a hard video for me to do because I'm going to have to say to them, who wants to spend more time with your family and not be stuck in traffic? Who wants to actually afford a decent home? Those mountains are super pointy. And the sunshine, you have to have sunglasses with you 24/7, who needs that? But ultimately, that is really what we trade on, the fact that we've created this diverse, inclusive place with this extraordinary, unmatched quality of life. And because you're from Seattle and because I know we have people from Silicon Valley with us, I'll say one last thing on my pitch here, which is I'm sitting here in my fully equipped home studio, which is also known as my dining room. I live in a very boring suburban neighborhood in a very typical 2,000 square foot house near rapid transportation. If I drive, I'm 20 minutes to downtown. If I take the train, I'm 17 minutes to downtown in an incredibly vibrantly, culturally diverse neighborhood. And my house was assessed this year at $480,000 Canadian. So with that, back to you.
Well, I know people aren't paying those prices in Seattle, so you might have done a good sales job and what I would expect from, as I said, the chief cheerleader of Calgary. Great synopsis there. James and Bobbie, I'd like to just turn it over to you in terms of what you see coming more from the entrepreneurial vantage point in terms of the real differentiators for the innovation economy in Calgary. Hop in, Bobbie.
Yeah. It's funny that you said about the sunglasses because I actually was being bugged by some friends the other day that I have about 40 pairs of sunglasses. I moved here from Saskatchewan, and something about the Alberta community, for me being a pretty small startup compared to a lot of the big ones that are out here, it's a community that I feel like it's a community. Not only do I feel like it's a community, but I feel like I have all the support that I need. And I think that that's what differentiates us from a lot of the other areas that I've been to. I've been Toronto, Seattle, I've been Washington, I've been in a lot of places. And the community here, I think, is what drives it home for everybody. And that's something that I'm extremely proud of and why I've decided to keep Virtual Gurus here in Alberta.
Great. James, do you have some thoughts on what you think is the key differentiator?
Yeah, definitely. I love the way that both Bobbie and the mayor described the city, from the lifestyle to the community. Those are all important and really critical parts of why I'm part of the community as well. The mayor also touched on big problems and solving big issues. And really, that's when you look back at Calgary and Alberta as a whole, that's what our economy has been doing for a long, long time. And we've been producing outsized results. Calgary always punches over its weight when it comes to the economic output that we have. There's a lot of reasons for that. But the first, I think, is the community of entrepreneurs support each other, that back each other through the hard times, whether it's finances or otherwise. And the outcomes that we see coming out of the city are way above the norm, both nationally and internationally. So that's one of the things that I think is really important, is the scale of what we accomplish in this city.
Yeah, James, maybe I'll stick with you there for a second. I'm curious, the mayor mentioned some of the key areas: ag tech, fintech, new energy, clean tech. What do you see as the areas that are most ripe in terms of industry specific in Calgary that are kind of poised to take off, and maybe a little explainer on why those specific industries?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of what the past is for us now and the future. When we look at energy as a whole, we are really well poised to be innovators and really global opportunists when it comes to the expansion of the technology that's around energy. And it's not just to the traditional side of energy; it's moving into the future in clean tech and all of the areas where there's a lot of strength. I even see that playing out into planetary sciences, water management, anything that you're doing underground. There's a lot of innovation coming in those types of areas, and Calgary is an incredibly strong place for that. The medical world as well is one where I think we're poised for an explosive amount of growth. The amount of IP developed in Calgary over the last decade is substantial, and it's been powered by a lot of the foundational families that have been providing capital in philanthropic ways into the research institutes. So that's one I'm very excited about. Fintech is a baseline technology that's very prolific in Canada. Calgary's no different. And again, we punch above our weights when you look at the outcomes that have come in Fintech with the recent Solium deal with Morgan Stanley taking them out, Cement growing as quickly as it is. There's just so much opportunity in Fintech in Calgary, and the expertise that underlies that is really prolific as well. So it's a real great diverse economy as well. So I'm not betting on any one sector. All of a sudden, we're going to see great things come out of weird places in this city, and I'm really excited about that too.
Yeah, wonderful. Well, Mayor Nenshi, maybe I'll toss it to you for a moment, because I think when people think of Calgary, other than the Stampede and maybe your hockey team, they think of the energy sector. And I'm curious how and why Calgary has made this decision to try to pivot into new areas beyond, or diversify beyond the energy sector, and how that process is going.
Well, I am super proud of the Canadian energy sector. I'm super proud of what we've been able to do for the world. I happen to think that access to reliable energy is one of the greatest poverty fighting tools that we've got. But any city wants to diversify. And of course, the world is changing. And of course, we are in the midst of an energy transition. Of course, climate change is a very real and very threatening issue in front of all of us, and every human being has to face that. The good news is what we've got here is that entrepreneurial and innovative spirit. We've got a great deal of private capital, as James was referring to, sloshing around in the community. And we've got this incredibly talented workforce. So when you put all of those three things together, then you really are able to build on that. And so we have this economic development strategy. It's called Calgary and the New Economy, and I get paid a commission every time I remember the title of the strategy, which is such a boring title. But what it basically says is that, as you were alluding to, that there are 7 main industries that are helping us solve the world's problems, where we have varying degrees of strength, but we want to be stronger. And those 7 industries are energy in all its forms, conventional, unconventional, clean, green, renewable, agriculture and agri-food, life sciences, transportation and logistics, travel and tourism, the creative industries, and financial services. And you'll notice I didn't say tech, because just as you did, you can add tech to the end of any of those words. FinTech, agritech, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not sure about logistics tech, but believe it or not, one of our most promising little companies in Calgary is a robotics company that calls itself a geometry company. It's called Adabotics, and they can basically do a fulfillment center in 10% of the space that a normal fulfillment center is. And their clients include every major retailer in North America that is not named after a big river in South America. And so these are really interesting areas where we can grow. And we believe that in the energy sector only, there's an $18 billion digitization opportunity happening over the next few years. So as a result, tech is the underpinning of a lot of this stuff, a lot of stuff that is allowing us to change. And it's all based on 4 fundamental pillars. And those are the business environment. We have very low tax environment here. A recent study showed that of the 50 major urban areas across North America, Calgary has the single lowest cost of doing business. We're really focused on cutting red tape and helping entrepreneurs succeed here. So that's business environment. The next big pillar is talent. And talent is really about taking advantage of the incredible STEM workforce we've got here, a lot of it out of the energy sector. Adabotics has said they would never have survived if they couldn't hire a bunch of people coming out of the energy sector. The third is innovation. I won't say much about that. James and Bobbie can say much more about our innovation here. Oh, by the way, Bobbie, before I forget, I just wanted to put on my favorite ball cap that I like to wear all the time.
You're awesome.
We are so
That's a
proud
mayor
of
who's
Bobbie.
doing actual promotion for an individual startup. There you go.
Oh, we are so proud of Bobbie and the work she's done with Virtual Gurus. It's outstanding. So I'll let them talk about innovation. And the final piece is what we started the conversation about, which is place. A real sense of belonging, a place of being, a place where you can achieve your dreams. And that's what we're really excited about. Investing in quality of life and arts and culture, in alternative transportation and recreation and parks, all those things that make life worth living. And that's so when we put those 4 places together, 4 pieces together, I think we end up with a pretty cool combination. I feel like all I'm doing is selling, and I'm very happy to answer very tough questions. But the tough question that was, well, I'll just say the tough question that was embedded in what you were saying is, look, you're an old industry, you're climate unfriendly, you know, it's ancient technology. Why in the world would young people interested in innovation and be interested in doing this work? And I'll tell you this, if we take energy by itself, the world doesn't work without it. You know, I grew up at McKinsey at a time when there were brownouts in Silicon Valley every day. You couldn't have a phone call with colleagues in the Valley without worrying about the electricity. I was recently in my ancestral homes in East Africa and realized that even though you've got talented people who speak English, who have lots of opportunities to do stuff, there's not reliable electricity in too many places. So I believe providing the world with energy is something we should be proud of. We need to take on climate change in a very big way, and we need smart people right here working with the smart people who are already here to solve this problem for the world. All right, that was my tough answer to your non-existent tough question.
I'll come back, Mayor Nenshi, with a couple others here later in the program. I did want to toss it over to Bobbie. Another key thing, in addition to those 4 pillars that the mayor just mentioned, is this idea of capital. You need money to fuel new businesses, and you need a culture of recycling that capital back into the community. You know, one of the things in my research that I learned that was fascinating is that there are more millionaires per capita in Calgary than any other Canadian city. And to me, that seems like a real asset if, for the startup community, that money gets pumped back into the community. And so, Bobbie, my question to you is, as an earlier stage entrepreneur, how are you finding the capital infrastructure to fuel you, to take you to that next level?
You know, I mean, you know, I've had my ups and downs, and I'll be honest, as a small startup, you know, there's a lot of investors here. There's a lot of new impact funds that are coming forth, which is amazing. You know, a lot of VCs, a lot of angels, and the community is being built here, but I think one of the most important factors of all of this, though, is that all of the businesses and the startups and the tech companies, the giant companies that are out there, we're all creating jobs and talent to be able to pump that revenue back into the economy. And that's one of the most important things that I kind of wanted to touch on when it comes to staying in Calgary. But for me, it was good. I traveled outside of Alberta a lot to close my funding round. And I do have a few investors here. And one of the, there's tons of investors. And I mean, you're going to get a lot of no's, but you got to take those no's as a way of the constructive feedback to be able to know what you need to work on and keep going at it. But there is a ton of investment here, and there's a ton of jobs and talent and a ton of innovation to be had out here for sure.
Yeah, wonderful. James, I know you're actually investing in companies in Calgary, so maybe you can follow up on that. And I guess I would ask, when you think about the venture capital scene and the investment scene, what's missing from it right now?
Yeah, great question. So there's no doubt that raising capital is hard, should be hard. I think it's hard in most places. The availability of capital here, if you have a good company at around a Series A level of maturity with good metrics, global capital will find you. And that's been proven out. Where I think there are limitations or constraints today is in the earlier stage of funding of these companies. So that's where I actually focus my attention, is in that seed stage of first investment rounds, even sometimes in the very early stages of company formation. And to me, that's where the opportunity is today for an investor, is investing at that stage, because there's not a lot of people that are congregating around that. However, the trend line on that is getting really steep. And so I don't think that opportunity is going to be around for much longer. So what we're seeing now is exactly what you just described around the recycling of capital from successful entrepreneurs back into the ecosystem, while at the same time, the people that have missed out on that first wave of growth, who have traditionally participated in agriculture or energy or real estate, are now looking at this sector very seriously. And not just from the standpoint of, can I make money? It's, can I make impact? Impact in my city, impact in creating jobs, creating opportunity for the next generation, and supporting the city that got them their initial in the first place. So there's that component of community that comes back to play here. And when the mayor talks about that lifestyle and Bobbie talks about the community, that really influences the capital structures that are happening here. And we saw it happen in agriculture. We saw it happen in energy, and now we're starting to see it happen in technology. So although there are those constraints, that gap is shrinking, and I expect there to be a plethora of capital around here in the next 5 years.
Yeah, certainly the community piece is important, and the culture of a place is important. And this is kind of a softer part of it, but I often talk, when I think about Silicon Valley or even Seattle, there seems to be just an entrepreneurial DNA or an entrepreneurial mindset that exists in these places, which is kind of hard to replicate. Marcos Lopez, who's the CEO of Solium Capital, which sold to Morgan Stanley for $1 billion here recently, had this to say about Calgary. He said, in Calgary, we come from an economy where you don't know if you're going to get oil when you drill a hole in the ground. So I'm wondering, how much that entrepreneurial mindset in your mind flows through the culture of the place and impacts the ability to start new businesses.
I'll jump in on this one. So I think that is an incredibly important part of the culture of Calgary. Sure, it's easy to point at our Stampede and say we have a cowboy lifestyle, and we do. We have that cowboy lifestyle when you go out into the ranches, and they're taking risks every day. It's whether the bear is going to eat the cow or the freeze is going to come in early. Like Marco said about the drilling a hole down, you never know what you're going to get. That's a gambler's mentality, and it's based off of this wildcatting type of go broke or go big or go broke kind of thought process. And that kind of risk tolerance, I think I would say risk tolerance, not risk not risk taking, but risk tolerance is something that is really prolific in Calgary. I feed off of that as well. I love working with the entrepreneurs that believe that they can do anything. And it also comes from this, the example that other entrepreneurs have set, where we have, easily stated that there is the most per capita millionaires in Calgary. There's a reason for that. It's because we create the biggest businesses and we share that wealth with the employees. And we create probably the most billionaires per capita too. I would have to check that. But that just speaks to exactly this wildcat, dream big, go big kind of mentality that's very, very standard in our city.
Yeah, well, you've already almost convinced me to move. But before I do, I need to know the challenges. Any journalist wants to push back on, the Calgary's maybe areas where it needs improvement. And so what do you see as the biggest obstacle to Calgary reaching that next level? You've had a lot of success, but what's holding you back? Mayor Nenshi, I think you're on mute.
Part of the concern is that the mayor is still technologically illiterate after all these months of just using Zoom all the time. I think there's two things that I would reflect on there. Number one is just getting on the list. So my colleagues at Calgary Economic Development spend a lot of time telling people about Calgary, because you're right. Maybe they've heard of the rodeo or the hockey team or the exceptionally good-looking mayor, or the energy sector, but we have a lot of untold stories. Bobbie's stories and James' stories are untold. This week we had another unicorn, a wonderful company called Benevity, which pulls together an incredible view of society and social good with making a lot of money. And, when I reached out to the CEO and said, congratulations on this $1 billion valuation, the only thing he said to me is, I'm just so happy that so many people who have put their heart and soul into building this company, which is good for the world, are going to make a lot of money today. And I didn't think of another CEO who would say that immediately as their first thought.
Well, let me stop you there for a second, Mayor Nenshi, because I was having the exact opposite thought. I couldn't think of a mayor, especially here in our city of Seattle, that would reach out to a company to congratulate them on a $1 billion valuation. At least in Seattle, I think that would be political suicide.
No, you know what? He's built a beautiful company and contributed enormously to the community at the same time. And of course, I was going to call him that. And he sits on my roundtable on mental health, and I need him to continue doing that work and not go away. But I was thrilled to be able to do it. So part of the thing is getting the story out there. When every city in the world was bidding for Amazon, we knew we were never going to get it, but we knew that it would be a real opportunity for us to bring our community together and tell a story. And you might remember seeing the billboards in downtown Seattle that said, not saying we'd fight a bear for you, but we totally would. And so part of that is just that visibility and getting people to know that. Because when you think about coming to Canada, and there are so many big reasons for people to want to set up in Canada. I'll give you one. Let's talk about the 3 dirtiest letters in American tech, H1B. I was in India just before the pandemic hit, literally as the pandemic was hitting. And I was on a trade mission, talking to Indian tech entrepreneurs. And I was giving them Canada's usual story, which is the equivalent of the H-1B visa in Canada for foreign nationals. The federal government has a benchmark of issuing that in 2 weeks. I didn't say 2 years. I said 2 weeks. And I asked the people in India, no way. Are you actually doing this in 2 weeks? And they said, absolutely not. It would be a failure if we did it in 2 weeks. We get them in 9 days. And so Canada is open to this talent in a very big way. But when people think of Canada, they think of Toronto and Vancouver. If they're into digital gaming and that sort of thing, they might think of Montreal. But here's the thing. I love Toronto. I love Vancouver. They are among the most amazing cities in the world. They are ranked as the 2nd and 3rd best cities in North America in which to live, right behind us. But depending on the problems you're trying to solve, are you trying to solve war for talent due to extraordinarily high cost of living, which is something that you're seeing in Seattle and in the Valley? Well, you're going to see that, unfortunately, in Toronto and Vancouver as well. Are you trying to figure out ways to retain talent? Well, you're going to be able to get that here. So that's our one big problem, which is visibility. Our second big challenge is actually the dark side of the coin that James just highlighted, which is we've got this tremendous track record in startups and in entrepreneurship and in flips and in growing just big enough to get a bigger guy to pay attention to you in the energy sector. And we've created an enormous amount of wealth. Our challenge has been adapting our entrepreneurial culture to a different model, because that model has worked so well. Don't aim to create a lasting business. Aim to get just big enough, go through a lot of burn until somebody big notices you and buys you. And that model isn't always the right model for the kinds of startups we're seeing today. So that small shift, that 10% shift in the 90% really well-working innovation ecosystem is something we still are continuing to work on.
Yeah, Bobbie or James, any thoughts on biggest obstacles? The mayor mentioned visibility, exposure. What do you both see as obstacles for the next set of growth for Calgary?
You know, one of the areas, and maybe Bobbie's company is solving part of this, is talent. And it's not from the standpoint of there's a lack of talent in Calgary. There's just a lack of certain types of talent in Calgary that may be specific to certain types of startups. We haven't seen a lot of big companies cycle through a life cycle of their from start to finish that have bled off these highly experienced, really technically strong people that then go ahead and do it again. We see a lot of them starting to come to the city, actually. But now with the virtualization of the workforce and what's happened through COVID, I'm not sure that's as big a deal as it once was, and because the trend lines were already shifting in our favor. But it's the one that I pay attention to the most as I look at companies that are going from 20 people to 100 people, and the requirements within that organization now are different. We need to ensure that that level of talent is being addressed. So that's an area that I focus on as well. And I know that the universities and Calgary Economic Development are working on in conjunction. So I believe that's being addressed, but it is one of the areas of challenge for sure.
And Bobbie, I would love to hear your perspective. Maybe if there's one thing you could change about Calgary's tech industry, what would it be, or the biggest obstacle that you feel the city is facing?
You know, I think that, you know, if I could speak coming more from my story side of it, but I think for me, if I could speak for a lot of other smaller startups that are around my size, it's not only the recognition side of it that, you know, but it's more of the kind of getting forgot about in that scale up process. You know, so you have the early stage companies that are providing accelerators for early stage startups. And then you have the tech giants that are up there, but you need that kind of middle scale up stage of, because scale ups also need help. And the one thing that I've been noticing is that Calgary doesn't have a lot for those people that are in that stage, because we still need a lot of help. So I think that's something that we could work on. And one place that we're working on that is a part of the Calgary Innovation Coalition. And we're talking a lot about that in there and trying to figure out ways that we can start supporting more startups or scale ups, so to say. So I think that's probably one of my main points that I think the city needs to work on a little bit.
Yeah, let's say I have a company, 200-person company here in Seattle, and I'm ready to pack it up and move operations to Calgary. What are the steps that I need to be thinking about to go through that process?
Well, I mean, we have plenty of space. I think that
real estate is not a problem.
Yeah, I think Mayor Nenshi would be able to answer this one perfectly.
Yeah, call me. But actually, what I will call you, I will say welcome and we love you and we're happy to have you. But I will immediately turn you over to my colleagues at Calgary Economic Development. If you go to Calgary Economic Development, calgaryeconomic.com, you will get a pure concierge service. We have subject matter experts in each industry, and that person will hold your hand. They'll introduce you to the right real estate brokers. They'll introduce you to the post-secondary institutions to help you hire locally. And they can even help you start in your early stages by finding you space to live in temporarily. I'm really proud of that white glove concierge service that we're able to provide to businesses. And I really encourage you to reach out to our colleagues at Calgary Economic Development. But call me first so I know.
And it sounds like you'll make a call back once they reach $1 billion valuation.
Probably
So,
before that.
maybe before. Are you offering any sort of incentives, or are there any initiatives in the city to actually make that poll even a little more aggressive?
Yeah, things are going to change a little bit going forward. I should point out before I get into the conversation about specifically incentives is that the cost of doing business is so much lower than in overheated places like, Seattle or the Valley. For Amazon, just as a simple pro forma, because there's no healthcare premiums, because taxes are lower, because the wages are lower, and because rents are lower. If Amazon had replicated their Seattle headquarters in downtown Calgary, they would have saved on the order of $2.5 to $3 billion a year. Now, of course, everyone's not on that scale, but there are built-in incentives in a very big way. And there will be more news on that soon from the government of Alberta, who are taking a much more proactive view on business development than they have been. And I expect we'll hear a little bit from that in Q1 of 2021. If you have a really, really interesting world-changing idea, then come to me. The City of Calgary has set up a $100 million fund that we call the Opportunity Calgary Investment Fund, or OSIF. It's not a traditional incentive fund. Don't come to it and say, subsidize my rent for the first year. But if you've got a really interesting idea that the city can partner with you in, then there will be some funding available. It is a tough process. We got a very high bar, but we do have about $70 million left in that fund that we can really look towards deploying for big, big ideas and big economy changing thoughts.
Does that come with some sort of equity position or a payback of some sort, or?
I'm smiling because as an ex-McKinsey guy from the very beginning, I've said, we need to take equity positions, and it's been hard to get government there. So right now it's a straight up grant program with no payback provisions, though we are in the middle of exploring a fund of funds idea with great partners like Thin Air Labs and thinking about how we can leverage up those kinds of investments as well.
Yeah, you mentioned overheated places like Seattle and Silicon Valley. I've often said, kind of good problems to have, because if Amazon would have set up in Calgary, I'm guessing that $400,000 house you're in is probably going to be a lot higher than that at this point. But I'm curious, when you look at a Seattle or Silicon Valley or a Denver or Salt Lake City here in the US, which are more emerging tech centers with some great companies coming out of those places. What stands out to you, and what do you think could be perhaps copied or emulated from those places?
Yeah, very happy to take a first cut at that. And then I really want to hear from Bobbie and James. One thing I will point out is, in fact, we were as overheated as Seattle or Silicon Valley for a long time. That's why we have so many millionaires. But if I say so myself, we've had very thoughtful urban planning. We've had a thoughtful way of building housing in the city, so we haven't run into the giant housing bubble, even when we were in a giant equity bubble. And that's something I'm actually very proud of. The equity, the other kind of equity, the equitable living and the diversity here, we really do focus on that in a very big way. But that said, I know some of these cities very well, and some of them less well as they're emerging. And fundamentally, really, you heard it from James, you heard it from Bobbie. Well, it's Bobbie's whole business. It's this question of talent. How do you really leverage that along with quality of life to be able to move forward, particularly in a world that is a bit borderless? We've learned over the course of this pandemic that a lot of people can work from everywhere, from anywhere. Open bracket, a lot of people with privilege can work from anywhere. That's a whole other conversation to have about how the pandemic has taught us about people who don't have those kinds of choices. But that said, close bracket, that said, the quality of life and the place to work, I think, is incredibly important. And focusing in on that is what really allows us to be able to move the investment forward. But I'd really love to hear what James and Bobbie have to say about it.
James or Bobbie, you want to take that? When you look at other tech centers, whether it's a Denver, Salt Lake City, Seattle, Silicon Valley, what stands out to you and lessons that you think you might want to take and apply in Calgary?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate to have gone through the boom that happened in Toronto back over the last decade, and see how that city developed. Now Toronto's, I don't know, 4 or 5 times larger than Calgary, but I would echo what the mayor said. When you think about adding a boom into the city, it's like, okay, we've done that before. We know how to handle it. And when I look at Calgary, we're just surrounded by prairies. We can expand this city further. There's a lot of density that can be added into the downtown core. And this is a scalable city. The way that it's been set up, from the traffic patterns to how the public transit is being developed, it's a scalable city. So I'm really actually excited about what could come. I'm a big city guy, so I'm not intimidated by growth, and that's so I would invite even an Amazon headquarters into Calgary. I think we would be able to absorb that and just keep running.
Definitely. And I definitely want to echo what James and Mayor Nenshi said. I've gone to a lot of those communities when I was raising my round, and have gone to a lot of startup events in the Valley, for example. And I've often found myself looking around thinking, Calgary could do this too. Alberta's got this, so I think that the one thing that we have that a lot of these places might not have is, like I said, is the thing that we've been touching on this whole conversation, but it's the community and how we have so much support here. And so I think we have the ability to be that next big hub for sure.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that I would add into this is, I think the mayor touched on this earlier. Alberta, Calgary in general, Alberta in general, Calgary specifically, may be the best place in Canada to start a business and run a business. Just the lack of regulation, the attitude, the teamwork, the community that supports it, the mayor that calls the successful CEOs who are giving back to the city, important parts of it, that should be forgotten.
Yeah, I had the opportunity to chat with Calgary entrepreneur and investor Brad Zumwalt preparation for this session, and he's written a memo to many of the city leaders and entrepreneurs in the community, striving to do more. And he's saying the city's falling short of its potential when it comes to the tech ecosystem, and has made a call to try to get the community to grow from its 15,000 tech jobs to 45,000 tech jobs in the next 10 years or so, and go from the 600 tech companies in Calgary to 2,200 companies in Calgary. These are pretty big metrics, and it's a pretty big push, and it's going to take a lot of effort to make that happen. What do you think about those proposals, and what do you think it would take to actually make that a success and make those numbers happen? And I'll open that up to anybody on the chat.
So, I would say, first of all, I love Brad because I love the way he just sets a fire under everybody to think big. What I would say about it is he's not aiming big enough, because I think we're going to hit those numbers no matter what. I think there's his comment about not hitting our potential, I think is accurate. I think there is so much potential here right now that is coming up. In the past may not have been tapped into, but now is being tapped into. So I'm incredibly encouraged by that. And I love the fact that the community is getting together to push the city and to be bold and think big around these types of things. And Brad and I have a lot of similar thoughts about this. And we think the potential of Calgary and what we can accomplish over 10 years is remarkable.
Mayor Nenshi, maybe you could chime in on that, because he's also very specific about a plan that needs to be put in place for this to happen, and that comes from government in some places, or at least government playing a role. Where do you think you need to step up to make those sorts of numbers happen?
And Brad has put his money where his mouth is. Let's not forget about that. He's been a tremendous contributor to our community in general, but he himself is investing with little hope of return, I think, in a very, very big ecosystem play that we call Platform Calgary, which is the creation of a new kind of, I don't even know how to describe it, incubator, accelerator, fire starter in downtown Calgary, in fact, across the street from my office at City Hall. And so I agree with James. This is the only time you'll ever hear me say that Brad Zumwalt is maybe not being bold enough. But ultimately, this is going to take a big partnership of the local, the provincial and the federal governments to think about things in a very different way than we've thought about in Calgary. You know, for a long time, because we were so rich, you know, those cities that you mentioned, by the way, you know, when you look at a city like Pittsburgh or Denver or Salt Lake that are, you know, these emerging hubs are just, or Nashville is a great example. After 2 decades of incredible growth in Nashville, they are now approaching Calgary's GDP per capita. And so remember, this is a very wealthy place. But for a long time, I think governments took sort of a hands-off view saying, you know, Calgary's rich, they'll just be rich. We'll just make sure we tax them and we'll go from there. And what our opportunity right now is to take this incredible, the ingredients that we've got here, and it is going to take a little bit of government support and philanthropic support and private sector support. And as in every place, investment in financing at every stage of the startup life cycle in order to make this work. The good news is we've got the ingredients, but Brad is right in starting a firing a call to action that this is our window of opportunity and we must act now.
Yeah, exciting times for sure. I just wanted to make a reminder to folks that if you do have questions, just go into the Q&A function on Zoom and post those. I'm taking a look at those coming in. And as I mentioned, we had a bunch of audience questions already come in when folks registered. One of them had to do with talent. So maybe I'll direct this one to you, Bobbie, since you're in the mix there. They were wondering just about the process by which American tech workers can get affiliated with Canadian companies and maybe vice versa. And I know you run a marketplace that helps do this. So talk a little bit about the process by which tech workers can have that cross-border pollination.
So what we do is a little bit like where we hire our marketplace, we contract to a little bit lower on the tech. So for people who I think are coming here that want to work in tech, there are companies like Mob Squad and a few other companies out here that can help you get, get your, if this is right, James, I think you probably would know a little bit more about this than I would, but they would be able to help you get your cards enough to be able to be licensed to work out here. I might want to let James and Mayor Nenshi answer that one because I think they would know a little bit more on that one than I would.
Yeah, certainly, I think we talked about the visa process being quite rapid here for the right types of people looking for the right types of roles. So that would be definitely one way to go about it, and that's through the government agencies that have that. But you would apply, I believe that process starts through the company, so the normal hiring process. So that's if you want to be a resident in Canada as a worker. Virtual, I think, is a lot easier. I think there's a lot of companies that are opening their doors to foreign workers, setting up different ways of paying them, whether that's through contract or setting up organizations overseas. So that is happening today. It's not as prolific as maybe it will be in a year or two as we continue to scale here, but that's another way that we've seen a lot of people. And like Bobbie mentioned, there are organizations here that are specifically set up for foreign workers to engage on a contract basis with our companies here. So they can engage through a third-party contracting system as well.
Yeah, you'll see in the chat that my colleague from Calgary Economic Development has been putting in some links of different resources for folks to look at. And I just wanted to highlight that Bobbie mentioned a company called Mob Squad. Mob Squad's a very cool company because it provides people with the opportunity to live in Calgary or in a couple of other Canadian cities, though they're headquartered in Calgary, and do work for the hottest startups in Silicon Valley, solving a problem, talent problem for the folks in the Valley, as well as providing the employment here. So if that's something that interests you, do check out Mob Squad.
Yeah, and keeping in the talent realm, we actually had another audience question that came in about, and we've seen this as a big problem in Seattle, where we had this amazing boom over the last 10, 15 years. And a lot of people got left behind and really kind of split the community with those who are in the tech field, many of people who have come from across the country, across the globe to participate in it, and folks who didn't get to the rising tide didn't lift all boats in many ways, and it's an unfortunate thing here in our city. And so I'm curious how you're thinking about that, if Calgary does go through this big boom and there is this transformation, to bring along the rest of the community so that all Calgarians can participate.
Well, you've just pulled my string. How much time do we have left? I'll just say
9 minutes.
I'll just say that in this place, inclusive growth is the most important thing that we're focused on. That's gender inclusive growth. That's growth that is inclusive of people from different backgrounds. It's growth that's inclusive of Indigenous people in our community, and we're good at it. We know what we're doing. Although wealth inequity is a big problem everywhere, it's less of a problem in Canada than it is in the United States. Whenever I talk to my American colleagues, it's shocking when they're talking about issues of poverty and issues of class mobility. When the pandemic started, the number one concern of every one of my mayoral colleagues in the US was food security, because so many kids get their only good meal of the day when they're at school. And if the schools are closed, what are you going to do? For a Canadian, these are very hard to comprehend issues. But at the same time, I don't want to make it sound like we're utopian here. COVID has exposed in many ways the weak underbelly of the economic system that we've created. And in particular, the fact that our so-called essential services workers, who we really need, because with all due respect, in the middle of a pandemic, you don't need a McKinsey consultant or a securities lawyer. You probably don't even need an angel investor, but you sure as hell need the person who's driving the delivery truck, or who's working in the long-term care home, taking care of the seniors, or who is selling you groceries. And in many ways, we have allowed a situation to occur where those are the lowest paid and most exploited people in our community, and they're the ones we need the most. And if technology can make life better for people, it should be making life better for everybody. And ultimately, the idea of inclusive growth is critical to me. I believe we need wealth. I don't have anything wrong with having rich people in the neighborhood. But I want to make sure those rich people's kids are going to public school with the grocery store clerks' kids. And we have to make sure, no matter what, that the people who are working and providing services in the city can afford to live in the city. But that's my job, as well as the job of all of us who are generating and distributing wealth in our community. But it's something that is deeply entrenched in the Calgary psyche.
Bobbie or James, any additional thoughts on that in terms of bringing along the rest of the community?
I think, it's not just in Alberta or Calgary. We certainly exude that. The community strength and support systems are there. It's a Canada-based philosophy as well. Our social systems of support for education, healthcare are fantastic. And I've always said about Canada is that I believe that as a community, we've decided that we can only move as fast as our slowest people. And so we want to raise those people up, or at least keep them moving as fast as the people that are driving the economy are moving. And that's a critically important part of ensuring that your business is strong and stable, that you've got a workforce that's focused on work rather than their health or their children's education. The infrastructure that's supplied by Canada and this is really strong in Alberta, especially in Calgary. It supplies lifelines of ease and convenience. Those social structures that we've got in place, though can be challenging at times economically, are really great at allowing us to explode when there's opportunities. So that's what I love about being an entrepreneur in Canada, is that not only are the economic opportunities available, but so are the social ones that are needed for us to do the things that we do.
Wonderful. Well, I know we're coming to time here. I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us. It's been a great discussion. Mayor Nenshi, I know I'm not going to put you on the spot here. I know you've been debating whether you're going to run for a next term for mayor. I'm not going to press you on that, but I will let you know that Mayor Jenny Durkin of Seattle just decided she's not going to run again. There's an opening in Seattle, and I'm sure after some of our guests today have heard you speak, they would welcome somebody with your viewpoint to come and help us reshape our economy here.
Well, I will jump in by saying that Jenny and I are part of the same cohort of mayors that have been working with Mike Bloomberg and the people at Harvard to be better mayors. And I am a huge fan of Jenny, and I did not know she made that announcement. So that's going to be my next call. Yes.
Unfortunately, the moderate viewpoint is not winning out in this city right now. So, but anyway, before we get too political, I did want to thank James, Bobbie, Mayor Nenshi for joining us, and a big thanks to the Calgary Economic Development Organization for helping to support this virtual roundtable. And if you want more information about what we discussed here, you can just go to calgaryeconomicdevelopment.com. You can get all the information you need. Again, thank you so much for joining us. Happy holidays to everybody, and stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you all. Merry Christmas, everyone, and all the best for a much better 21.